Welcome to Bring Learning Alive, making TCI work for you. This is our professional development session for March 9th, 2022. First, let's start with some session goals. Today, we're going to explain the components of the TCI Lesson Cycle. Then we're going to look at how to use TCI strategies to engage students in learning key social studies concepts. And third, we want to identify the next steps in CCS implementation for year 2 and beyond. I'd like to start with this reflective question for you. In teaching social studies, I used to do lots of blank. Now I do more blank. Would you take just a few minutes to think about this question, to reflect on if your teaching career is brand new this year, maybe it was some things you did at the beginning of the year that you've changed since that time. If your teaching career began 35 years ago, maybe there are some things you've changed in how you approach your teaching of social studies. Take just a few minutes to reflect on this. I used to do lots of blank, now I do more blank. The idea of using this prompt is simply to have us reflect on our own professional growth. And that really is the purpose of professional development, is for us to be able to be self-reflective and to think about the ways in which we grow professionally, the ways in which we are lifelong learners. And there's nothing wrong with saying I used to do things this way, but I learned over time, and now I do things more this way based on my experience. As we dig into some of these TCI strategies, I just want you to think about and come back to this idea. Are there things that I need to, areas where I need to make changes in how I'm delivering social studies instruction? And can some of these TCI strategies help me do that? What I'm not suggesting when we talk about implementing TCI approaches is that we simply take and throw out every practice that we've ever done and bring in only TCI strategies and only use the TCI program and lessons. I'm simply suggesting this as a way to reflect on where we can grow and how we can transition and change our practices over time. I came across this interesting student survey recently. There was a conference and a session presenter presented some updated research about how students like to learn social studies. And he referenced this study from Russell and Waters in 2010. And it asks two straightforward questions. Number one, it asks the students, how do you like to learn social studies? And you can see that about 79% said cooperative learning activities, 79% study guides, reviews, and review games to help prepare for exams and tests, 75% using graphic organizers and foldables, 72% under this broad category of technology, which might include internet, film, and video. Now, of course, this is from 2010, so it maybe is a bit dated now, especially having been in remote learning. I wonder if student views of technology may have changed as technology grows and as they were sort of forced into the use of technology exclusively during remote learning. But it's an interesting question for us to reflect on. How do you like to learn social studies? And again, these are student responses. Question 2, what do you dislike about social studies? 74% said lecture, 74% rote memorization and note-taking, 70% worksheets, 63% under this category of busy work, 63% assignments from the textbook. Now, I'd like you, again, just to think for a minute and reflect on these two questions. What implication should this data have for our instruction? Assuming your student data is probably somewhat similar to the evidence presented here. We don't want to get the idea that simply we are to cater our instruction to only what students like or dislike. This can't be the exclusive factor in determining what instructional strategies we use. There may be times when it's necessary to use strategies that students may not particularly like, but we may have other compelling reasons to do so. Of course, we need to look at research that shows us not just what students like, but also what research shows us about which strategies are most effective in teaching particular kinds of content or concepts or skills. But this information is at least helpful in asking us or compelling us to ask that question, what do students like and dislike? And I think it goes especially to this question of student engagement that's so paramount today. If we can at least begin to tailor our strategies and to look at the ways in which students like to learn, are they more likely to be engaged? And I think that the TCI strategies really focus on that piece of engagement that we are all so eager to have in our classrooms. First, let's talk a little bit about, before we jump into the TCI strategies, where do you access the CCS TCI tools and resources? All of this is available on the Social Studies homepage and always located right here under Featured Resources. So when you go to the ccsoh.us/social studies, always under Featured Resources, you'll see the TCI home base, as well as the on-demand PD that can walk you through how to use TCI in your classroom. From there, there will be a number of resources that you can access on the TCI home base that will walk you through really each step of implementing TCI, from using the online materials to students using the online materials, and also the strategies that we're going to talk about today. Now let's dig into the TCI lesson cycle. As with any good inquiry-based approach, TCI's lesson cycle starts with an essential question. Now, in our 612 social studies curricula, we have added overarching essential questions that cut across all of our courses. But in this case, we're talking about unit-specific essential questions. So we're talking about essential questions that relate to a specific topic. Those essential questions can build into those broader overarching essential questions that we've established for all of our courses. But these unit-specific, topic-specific essential questions still have a lot of the same characteristics. They're open-ended questions that we can discuss and debate and research, investigate. And they give students something to really dig into. So from that essential question, we frame this out by starting with a preview activity. And a preview activity is really about accessing prior knowledge. It's about connecting this new lesson content to what students already know. And most often with these preview activities, it's something that students can relate to in their own personal life. So they may be asked to give an example of a particular concept in their personal life. And then in the lesson, we're going to investigate what that concept looks like in a historical or in a social science context. So we're moving from what students know based on their prior knowledge to new information. And then secondly, this is the activity or engagement strategy phase. And this is where the textbook reading is typically intertwined with one of those 6 TCI strategies. We're going to cover 3 of the TCI strategies today. Sometimes the TCI strategies are also part of preview activities as well, but mostly they're incorporated into this core part, this activity or engagement strategy. And this is where the textbook comes into play as well. One of the things that's unique about TCI is that the textbook is built around the lesson, and the lesson is built around a specific strategy. So most of the time when you look at textbooks, they are developed by some scholar in the field, and then teachers may come in and build learning activities for the company, worksheets that accompany the materials. TCI does it the opposite. TCI started as a professional development organization around these engagement strategies. Then they started to build supplemental materials around those engagement strategies to help teachers implement them in the classroom. And then they went into the core textbook market. So they built the textbook around the lesson, which is built around the strategy. And that's really, I think, what makes TCI stand out from so many others, is that it really is, the text is not simply there as a reference tool, but it really is intertwined with this lesson. Now, our theme here today is to make TCI work for you. right? And so that doesn't mean you have to do every one of these lessons and read every textbook chapter exactly as it's laid out in the TCI lesson. You can customize this to make it work for you. But I do want us to really understand the lesson cycle and the strategies, because I think that's where the empowerment comes from in our ability to actually make those customizations, is if we understand the underlying philosophy here, what the cycle is and what the strategies are. Okay, so next is the processing assignment and the summative assessment. So the processing assignment you can think of as the creative ways, the informal kinds of assessments, and then TCI also has built into its platform a formal assessment or test tool. And then finally, the culminating unit timeline or inquiry activity, depending on which program you're in. If you're in those that have more of a historical focus, there's a timeline task. If you are in Government Alive, for example, it will be more of an inquiry task based on government. So that's the TCI lesson cycle. Now, what we're going to start to do is dig into some of these activities and engagement strategies. And in just a minute, we're going to have Brian Thomas come in. He's going to talk about the visual discovery strategy and really walk you through a step-by-step of what visual discovery looks like in the TCI approach. But before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about some next steps in where we're headed with TCI in the years to come. So this is our first year of formal adoption of TCI. We've been using History Alive strategies for many years in the district. We've had supplemental materials. Some of you who've been around for a while have been to History Alive training. It's been a few years since we've offered that in the district, but some of you have been through that. Since our adoption at the beginning of this school year, you've heard basically from 4 people. Brian Thomas, who you will hear from again in just a minute. He's a national account manager, also former teacher here in Ohio. And Loyal Frazier, who's a current teacher in Oklahoma and a TCI trainer. Kathleen Garrity, who's a teacher in Florida and a TCI trainer. And you've heard from me. So you've heard from 4 people about implementation of TCI strategies thus far. And while all of us are happy to be able to share and engage you in TCI strategies, we really want to build out capacity internally in our district. And so we want bringing TCI to you to really be about you and learning from your colleagues. And so what we're going to be doing is recruiting internally for some of you who would like to become really TCI experts in the district. And part of that will involve what is called TCI coaches training. And this is really a train the trainer model. And so what we do is bring TCI in for 30 hours of professional development. We'll start on this summer. We probably won't finish it, but they'll start providing professional development on the TCI approach and the strategies so that you become deeply immersed in it. Those individuals will become the district experts for 2022 and beyond. There'll be grade level specific, strategy specific, so that if you have questions about social studies skill builder, for example, we're going to talk about in a later session, we're going to have some district experts who've really dug in deep to this strategy and not just learned about it from TCI, but really use it in their classroom, and they've learned to customize it in their classroom. I think that's a really critical approach to this as well. So we're pretty excited about being able to do the TCI coaches training and to really help you help each other out in the implementation of TCI, because that's really what it's all about. So we'll begin that this summer, and it will probably go into the next school year, and we'll look at ways of incorporating those district experts then into professional development offerings, as well as just informal kinds of things. It might just be an email support or a quick demonstration classroom video where the district experts demonstrate a particular strategy or particular grade level lesson. The other place you can go is go to the Social Studies Connection Canvas course. And you can enroll in that Canvas course, and there are discussion boards available by grade level. So you can actually go on and you can share ideas, you can ask questions, you can post maybe some adaptations of TCI lessons that you've done. There are so many different options you can do, but we encourage all of you to really have those conversations. And I know I've had conversations with some of you about adapting particular strategies. And hopefully you've had conversations with each other at the building level as well. So that is really our introduction to TCI strategies. What we're going to do now is dig into a specific TCI strategy, one of the 6 engagement strategies called visual discovery. And Brian Thomas from TCI is going to walk us through the visual discovery strategy. Over to you, Brian.